as being drafted from Lord Mayor to Liberal leader, which she resisted.
It is an enormously difficult transaction to make, transfer to make. Enormously difficult. If you're Lord Mayor of a city like Brisbane, you're right at the top of the tree. Being the Lord Mayor in the city of Brisbane is a bit different to being Lord Mayor in other cities. It's almost a city-state.
Yeah.
To leave a position like that and go and nominate for pre-selection and find a seat and come up through the ranks is an almost impossible ask. What we did was come up with a model that allowed a successful leader to transition to a leadership position. And to transition to a leadership position of an organisation that badly needed a leader such as he. And to do that, we had to break all the rules. We had to come up with a whole lot of new explanations for things so that people could understand it. But once we were able to explain that Campbell Newman was going to be the leader of the LNP election team, to take a team of people to an election, I think that was something that the people of Queensland embraced, because that's what they wanted. They wanted a united team led by an experienced leader, and that was the key to explaining the model. We came under a lot of pressure from Paul and his colleagues, and that's their job, and they did it willingly.
You've always been the blushing violet, Jeff.
They did it willingly, and
it's like croquet on the lawn with Jeff.
But the model has been embraced by the people of Queensland tonight, and you look at those numbers. What more can you say? It's a great job, Campbell.
Paul Lucas, your reflections listening to Campbell Newman tonight?
Well, first of all, congratulations to Campbell Newman. The people of Queensland have spoken, and it is their decision. They have the right to decide who governs them, and they have decided. I certainly note his gracious speech, and he deserves acknowledgement for that. Of course, he has now a very big task, and I suppose what Jeff made the point about the nature of Campbell's election. And I think it is part of the gravitation that we are now seeing in Australia towards US style. A presidential sort of election. There's always been strong leaders, leader against leader. That's the nature of campaigns. But now the fact that someone can come from outside the system that has been now legitimised by this process, I think shows a further drift towards that US style, where that is a legitimate way of proceeding. Now,
it's a drift that's been coming for a long time.
Oh yes, and look, and I've sort of think that ultimately we will actually end up closer to a US system in this country than that. Now, what Campbell Newman, of course, now has, though, is the responsibility to deliver on that with a big mandate. The Liberal Party part of the LNP is far larger now than it once was. So to manage Bush expectations will be a very big challenge for him.
Yep.
But congratulations to Campbell Newman. The people have spoken. Now it's for him to get on and administer that, and we will oppose, even as an opposition does appropriately, even though from a very, very difficult position.
Okay. Now we're going to pause for a moment to clarify the position in terms of numbers of seats and how the parliament is going to be made up, and Anthony's going to take you through the chamber.
Well, let's look at start off with the seats, which have been definitely won by one side or the other, and this is just overwhelming. The Labor Party, we've definitely given 6 seats at the moment, 75 to the LNP, 2 for the Katters Australian Party and 2 others. Now, I should point out here, we believe the LNP has gained Burnett from Rob Messenger, and Chris Foley in Maryborough is in trouble. He's behind on first preferences. That one will be the one to watch. So at this stage, Chris Foley behind, but the LNP has also gained Anango. They have gained. They gained Burnett, but they probably haven't won Nicklin. I think Peter Wellington will be returned there, as is Liz Cunningham in Gladstone. Now we can project to what we think the overall prediction at this stage is.
Wow.
This is Labor 7, LNP 78. 2 there. That's the biggest landslide in Queensland history. Majority of 67. That's more seats than Peter Beattie won in 2001. Now, just to say, that 7 is bobbling up and down. There are a couple of seats where Labor is behind, where, because the LNP may not have put a huge effort into the postal vote campaign in seats like Lytton, that perhaps that may get up to 8 or 9, but double figures is about the best they can get to.
Not that Paul's holding out much hope for Lytton.
No, well, look, that's the overall picture. I think the entrails of the details of specific electorates. But I just thought there have been a couple of peculiarities in seats where independents have been swept away, I think, by the surge in the LNP support.
So every possibility that Labor will not have enough numbers in the next parliament to qualify formally to be a political party, and so it will fall to the largesse of the government.
Kerry, that's only one of the very minor issues that arise for us in the Parliament.
But it says something about the nature of the new Parliament.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right. But after 2001 election, I think the Liberal Party was reduced to 3 members.
Yep.
We were reduced to 11. Between us, we had 14. But you know,
Yep.
in both those situations, the Liberal Party certainly didn't have enough numbers to warrant party status, and we almost were in the same position. So. But that fades into insignificance compared to the numbers we see tonight. If not for any other reason, then the numbers of seats that have changed. The starting positions were very different to what we see tonight.
Well, we're going to take a look at a couple of those seats specifically because we've got some interesting people standing by to talk to. The seat of Stafford in Brisbane's inner north. This was held by Sterling Hinchliffe for Labor on 7.3%. He's gone.
Absolutely, and Dr Chris Davis, Director of Geriatric Medicine at Prince Charles Hospital, will be out of the medical system because he's in Parliament. He's easily won Stafford with more than 50% of the vote. First Liberal member for Stafford since the 80s, so the seat was abolished there for a while. But Sterling Hinchliffe, another possible Labor leadership contender, he's been defeated. When we look at the overall swing that's occurring here, that's 14.3%. And we'll go on to the hero pages to show who's won the seat. And it shows that Dr Chris Davis comes forward, Sterling Hinchliffe fades into the background.
Okay, now Jessica Van Vonderen is standing by to talk with Sterling Hinchliffe as we speak.
Thanks, Kerry. Mr Hinchliffe, is the Labor Party in shock tonight?
Oh, certainly this has been an overwhelming defeat for the Labor Party, an overwhelming defeat for the government. It is shocking, it is disappointing, but it's time for us to start thinking about the future, as these milestones always are.
Before we get to the future, Campbell Newman was gracious in his speech thanking Anna Bligh for her service to Queensland. John McKell has commented tonight, though, that Anna Bligh has to take responsibility for what's happened in this election. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I think there's no doubt that Anna Bligh, along with the whole of her government, will take responsibility for this defeat. Certainly, while there's a whole lot of talk around issues associated with time for a change and all that sort of stuff, that can't wash away the pain and disquiet that people have felt around a whole range of different issues.
Well, what sort of issues?
Oh, well, issues like I've felt fundamentally in my area about the challenges associated with the health payroll debacle, the challenges associated with implementing what I think have been good policies that have not been popular in the community.
You're talking about asset sales there?
Oh, I think that was an issue that we could have explained better to the community, and I think that was important that we recognise that and understand that for the way we think about the future. But also, there are particular issues in particular areas which accumulate over a long period of time in government, and certainly we've seen all of that come home to roost once you've had an alternative that seemed even partway credible. The too many elections in the recent past we haven't had for the electors of Queensland an alternative that was even partway credible. And that's what we've seen tonight, and we've seen it all come home to roost in a real big way.
Who do you see now as the most viable leader of Labor in opposition? There's only a handful there. Oh,
well, that's a matter for the Labor caucus when they get a chance to identify who's their members and when they get a chance to get together. It's not my role from outside to make commentary. I want to work with them and support them from the outside as a loyal member of the Labor Party, but that's their role.
And the future for you, Mr Hinchliffe?
Oh, the future for me starts with tomorrow, cleaning out a couple of offices, but also a chance to spend some time with my family, talk to them about the nature of my future and the nature of our future together. But I am certainly interested in making sure that the Great Australian Labor Party, 121 years old, will continue to be part of modernising and progressing Queensland.
Mr Hinchliffe, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, one seat where the fight is not yet over for Labor is the seat of Mulgrave in North Queensland, and this has been in the Pitt family for some time for Labor, held by Curtis Pitt since 2009 on a margin of 8.1%, and the LNP, or the swing to the LNP, doesn't quite match that yet.
And what I mentioned earlier was that the Katter's Australian Party was doing best in North Queensland, and they've got over 25% of the vote. The rise in the LNP first preference vote is quite tiny, in all of North Queensland. It's been a surge to the Katters Australian Party. And you can see here where Dr Damien Burns has gained 30% of the vote, and the LNP vote is actually down on first preferences from the last election. And with exhausted preferential voting, it appears that the swing ends up as 6.7%, because so much of that 30% for Katters Australian Party just exhausts. And at this stage, we're projecting that Curtis Pitt will win that election. I think there's a lot of counting because of the sheer number of votes that have to be examined for preferences. But at this stage, we're saying Curtis Pitt has held on to that seat, which is a substantially smaller swing than has occurred in the rest of the state.
And Curtis Pitt is standing by to talk with Jessica.
Thanks, Kerry. Curtis Pitt, your father held the seat of Musgrave as well. It must mean a lot to you if you can hang on to this seat tonight.
Hi, Jess. Look, I think at the end of the day, this is really about the people in the local area. I entered politics to be a servant to the people, and at the end of the day, this is really about trying to make sure that they have the best representative possible. Of someone that has gone into this election with a vision of where I wanted to go into the future. I've not over-promised, and I'm certainly about trying to deliver into the future. That's what I want to do. I want to be part of whatever we are in Queensland as a Labor Party going forward, and I'm very keen to continue to play a very important part of that.
Can you fathom what the Parliament, this new Parliament, is going to look like? Sorry, Mr. Pitt, have I lost you there?
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Pitt, can you fathom what this new Parliament is going to look like with so many LNP members?
Well, what we've seen is a massive change to the political landscape in Queensland, and with that, of course, comes a great responsibility with the sort of majority that we're going to see with an LNP government. I've heard the speech by the Premier-elect tonight that it's going to be one with humility that they will be governing. I hope that is the case. I know that this is a resounding victory for the LNP, but ultimately we hope that for the good of Queensland they don't make change for change's sake, that they look at some of the great achievements we have made as a government and build on those for the good of Queenslanders.
Are you interested in being opposition leader?
I'm interested in holding my seat. Whatever comes after that is going to be a discussion that would have to happen within the Labor caucus. I know that I'm only a first-term member. I've experienced some terrific times with some excellent people, some learned people who've given me great wisdom. I know that the Labor caucus, I don't think this result reflects the quality of the members that we've had right across Queensland in the Labor caucus. At the end of the day, though, this is the result that we've seen from people right throughout Queensland. The people have spoken, and this is something that we've got to look at. I certainly don't think that tonight is a night for recriminations, and I'm certainly disappointed to hear some of the commentary. We need to have a good look at what this means and I guess regroup as a party. But I know that the Labor Party is a party which has always been based on good ideas and hard work and the principle of a fair go. That's why I came into politics. And if I'm able to retain the seat of Mulgrave, that's certainly what I intend to do into the future.
Curtis Pitt in Mulgrave, appreciate you talking to us.
Thanks very much, Jess.
And the Labor member who fought the biggest fight in this campaign to keep her seat, of course, was Kate Jones in the electorate of Ashgrove against Campbell Newman, and we're going to talk to her in a moment. We might just take another look at the seat of Ashgrove just to see what the latest figures are showing.
And we have all the votes in now for the night on first preferences, certainly. And Kate Jones put up a strong fight, but Campbell Newman, in the end, the swing to the LNP across the state, he's got the same swing as occurred everywhere else. Campbell Newman, 52.9% of the first preference. Kate Jones, just under 36. When we look at the actual two-party preferred swing that has occurred in this contest, it's a swing of about 13.6%, which is nearly twice the swing he needed to win the seat. And without doubt, Campbell Newman has gone on. He's won the seat. The LNP has won the election. The new Premier represents Ashgrove.
Okay, and Jessica Van Vonderen is standing by to talk with Kate Jones.
Thanks, Kerry. Kate Jones, you must be pretty disappointed tonight. I know you put everything into this campaign.
Well, Jessica, I always knew that this was going to be a tough fight, and I fought every day, door to door, street to street, suburb to suburb. I'm really proud of the campaign that we've run locally.
You say you're proud of the campaign run locally. What about statewide?
We always knew that this was going to be a tough fight. Let's be honest, Jessica, you were there in the tally room. We defied the odds in 2004 and we defied the odds in 2006 and 2009. I know that this was going to be a really tough fight and I fought it every day right up until 6 p.m. today.
Was there a point in the campaign that you felt that the fight had been lost? I mean, there was early polling sort of putting you in front, suggesting it was going to be a tight contest. Obviously, in the last week or two, it went completely the other way. Was there a point when you came to that realisation?
Look, Jessica, as I said to you, I think one of the first interviews I conducted when Campbell Newman first said that he was going to run for Ashgrove from outside the seat living in Windsor, that it was going to be a tough fight. We know during this campaign that I was actually in front, and that is a testament to all of the hundreds of volunteers, many of which have never been involved in a political campaign before, fighting for a local. And I'm really proud that we took the fight up to Campbell Newman right up until the end.
Why do you think he got over the line in the end and not yourself?
As I said, Jessica, this has been a really tough contest. We weren't meant to win the 2009 election, but it was Anna Bligh's determination and hard work during the last election which ensured that we won in that last week. And this was, I guess in some ways, a fight that was, going to be very tough from the very beginning. I congratulated Campbell Newman tonight on the phone. He has made history. But of course, Jessica, we all know that with power comes responsibility. And I really hope that he looks after all Queenslanders with this unprecedented power that he has won here tonight.
You worked for politicians after finishing university, then became a politician yourself. Would you be interested in a return to politics at some point?
It's a bit early for that to say, to be honest with you, Jessica, but I've had the privilege of working for people like Robert Schwarten, salt of the earth people that believe in making sure that everybody, no matter who they are, no matter where their parents come from, no matter how much money they have access to good quality education. And that will keep me up and running every day. Another sad thing that's happened tonight is for the first time in 20 years, the number of women in the Queensland Parliament has gone backwards. And I'm going to be part of the rebuild to make sure there are more women in the Queensland Parliament.
All right, Kate Jones, thanks for your time tonight.
Good on you, Jessica. You know how hard we fought here in Ashgrove.
Okay, good time now to take a look at what's happened around the state. We've had 67% of the vote counted across the state, and in that context, we're looking at a primary vote swing away from Labor of 15.8%. Nearly 16% swing on the primary vote away from the Labor government. To analyse what that means from region to region and across the parties, here's Joe O'Brien.
Thanks, Kerry. So a huge win tonight for the Liberal National Party, probably an unprecedented victory for Labor. It looks like the wipeout of 2012, left with probably less than a cricket team. Looks like something more resembling a volleyball team, possibly with an interchange player or two. Let's look at how the seats are won at this stage in terms of definites, and we've basically allocated them all. There's only 3 or 4 in doubt at this stage. Labor, 6 seats at this stage in the new parliament, a loss of 42 seats. The Liberal Nationals up there with 75 out of the 89 seats. That's a gain of 44. The Greens going nowhere. We're giving the Katters Australian Party 2 at this stage, Mount Isa and Dalrymple, and the Independents are 2 at this stage as well. Now let's take a look at how the primary vote is standard. Actually, we're going to take a look at the map first. This is a map of the greater Brisbane area of southeast Queensland. This is where Peter Beattie first established Labor, with and 34 of the 40 seats were held by Labor going into this election. As you can see, it's a lot of red there at the moment. But we'll change that now to how the complexion of Greater Brisbane looks now, and you can see that it is a sea of blue with only a few Labor seats left there. So let's take a look now at how the primary vote stands. We can see Labor there at 26.5% of the primary vote. The Liberal Nationals up there at about 50% of the primary vote at this stage. The Greens about what they were at the last election. The Katters Party about 11.7% and the Independents at 4.6%. So how does that compare to the previous election? As Kerry just said, the Labor Party vote has crashed, bottomed out 16% swing against Labor. 8.2% up for the Liberal National Party. The Greens down about 1%. The Katter Party at 11.7 and the Independents 3.2 down. So how does that look then in terms of the chamber at this stage? And there's a lot of blue and very little red. So at this stage, in terms of definites, we're saying the ALP has just six seats in the new parliament. It's an amazing picture, isn't it? And the Liberal Nationals at 75. If we factor in what the projected outcome is, we can see that we're giving the ALP just 8 seats at this stage. The Liberal National Party 77 seats, the Katter's Australian Party 2 seats, and the Independents 2. Let's take a look now at a few of the more senior members of the Labor Party and how they've gone. A few ministers will no longer be in the parliament. In the seat of Sandgate, with 76% of the vote counted, the Environment Minister, Vicky Darling, has lost out to Kerry Millard. That's a swing of 15.4% in Sandgate. Kerry Millard is the new member for Sandgate. Now we're going to take a look at the seat of Stafford. Sterling Hinchliffe was the Employment Minister. He's lost out to Chris Davis, a swing of 14% in the seat of Stafford there. So Sterling Hinchliffe is gone. We'll go now to Whitsunday up in the central Queensland area. Jan Jarrett was the Minister for Tourism. She is gone. Jason Costigan is the new member for Whitsunday with a swing of 13.9%. And finally, in terms of the more senior members of the Labor government, Tim Mulherron was the Minister for Agriculture. He has, with 65% of the vote counted, there's a 16.2% swing to the Liberal Party there. And the projection is that the ALP is ahead at this stage, but it's a very tight contest there in Mackay. Now we're going to have a look at the region in far north Queensland and the 4 seats around Cairns, where Labor has held those 4 seats up there. Steve Wetenhall was the member for Barron River with 66.8% of the vote counted. The swing to the Lib Nats is 12%. Michael Trout is the new member there. In the seat of Cairns, this is where Desley Boyle stepped down. Kirsten Lucena was up against Gavin King, the former journalist. Gavin King is the new member for Cairns with a swing of 11.3%. Sticking with the area around Cairns now, we're going to take a look at the seat of Mulgrave. We just heard from Curtis Pitt, and it looks like he has hung on there. There's been a swing of 6.7% against Curtis Pitt there in Mulgrave, but our projection at this moment is it looks like Curtis Pitt will retain that seat. And then finally, up in the Cairns area, we'll look at the seat of Cook. Jason O'Brien was the member there. 62.9% of the vote counted, a swing of 5.2% against Jason O'Brien. David Kempton is the new member for Cook. So, Kerry, it's a pretty sorry story there out for the Labor Party tonight in Queensland, but there are a lot of LNP members celebrating.
Thanks, Joe, and it's a sorry story that we're going to continue now, because Anthony is going to break those things down even further. He's going to separate the state vote into various trends, starting with the metropolitan area.
This is the real story of the swing from Labor to the LNP. Is in Brisbane Brisbane, and I'm looking at Brisbane. Am I Brisbane? I thought I was looking at the southeast. Brisbane, 32 there for Labor, 51 of the vote, 51% of the vote to the LNP. Straight switch from one side to the other, a red to blue. Only a small vote for Katter's Australian Party. The Greens on 10%, down slightly on the last election. So that is where the real story is. I haven't got the exact numbers on how many seats there are, but there's not many seats left in Brisbane when you remember that Labor held 34 before the election, so that's just remarkable. When we look at the regional areas of the state, this is everything outside of the southeast corner. Labor's on 22, down 15. We've got the LNP on 45, not much change. The Greens 4.7. This is the story outside of Brisbane, is that the loss of Labor vote has gone across the Katter's Australian Party in much of the state. There's also been a loss of there's fewer independents standing in this election. The LNP vote, the big swings in Brisbane, and let's remember, Campbell Newman is the first Conservative leader to be Brisbane-based in a century. It's had a huge reward in the southeast corner. There's not been that much of a change in the rest of the state, though it has varied from region to region.
I think the point that needs to be made there, Anthony, is that there were big swings across regional Queensland to the LNP last election.
That's just...
And those swings weren't replicated in the urban area. And that's really what the Campbell-Newman effect is. that it produced those sorts of swings across the populous southeast Queensland that actually happened last election in regional Queensland.
Of course, one of the areas where Labor's been hit again, you might say it's going back to its natural constituency, was the Gold Coast.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look, the Labor Party had always been sort of on the outer in the southeast, on the Gold Coast. They won Albert, they won Currumbin, but that was it until 2001 when they swept the state, when they played the security card, the confidence majority government that they played against One Nation. And you can see the result there, 22% for Labor, 58.9% for the LNP. It's an 18% loss of support for the Labor Party. Canada's Australian Party has got some votes on the Gold Coast, but essentially Labor's lost everything on the Gold Coast. They're back to what they were 2 decades before, well, certainly a decade ago, even worse than 2 decades. This is back to 1986 for the Labor Party on the Gold Coast.
Similar story on the Sunshine Coast?
Well, the Sunshine Coast went 2 elections ago. The Traveston Dam destroyed Labor's standing on the Sunshine Coast, and they lost their seats in 2006. In 2009, there was a big swing. Labor's votes declined even further. There is a vote for the Greens there. They picked up quite a bit of Labor support because of the Traveston Dam. Canada's Australian Party got 7%. But I mean, to be honest, the Sunshine Coast, the Labor Party lost that area. It's the one area that they lost during the Beattie years. Everywhere else in the state is now followed by the look of it.
Can we take one more look, Anthony, at the seats that have changed as a result of today's vote, or are changing?
We've got many changes here. We've got them in alphabetical order. Albert, Algester, Ashgrove. I think I'll just talk generally about the most interesting ones there. You can see Bow Desert, the LNP have gained that from Canada's Australian Party. Brisbane Central, there we are. Peter Beattie's old seat has fallen to a 10% swing. Peter K. Croft couldn't withstand it in Broadwater. Burleigh is also another one of those Gold Coast seats. Finally, the swing has caught up with Christine Smith. When we look at the next page, we've got another 8 electorates there. Burnett, Rob Messenger couldn't hold off the surge to the LNP, and the Independent has lost. The seat has gone back to the LNP where it was before Rob Messenger defected. Cairns has fallen. Capalaba, Michael Choi has lost his seat. Chatsworth, the most marginal seat, as expected, has fallen. Cook appears to be an LNP gain. I wasn't sure for a while, but the mobile booths have come in. And with the mobile booths in, you can be absolutely certain the LNP has won Cook. Everton has fallen. Neighbouring Ferny Grove, they're the two, the western suburbs of Brisbane has perhaps gone back to the Liberal Party, where it's often is at local and federal elections. Greenslopes is another LNP gain, though with a smaller swing. Cameron Dick has clearly been able to sort of withstand the swing to an extent. When we go on to the next page, we've got another, that's 16 seats that have changed hands so far. Rachel Nolan, that's a 20% swing in a margin that was previously a very safe seat. Ipswich West was always more marginal, and it's also fallen. Kalanga, north of Brisbane, has gone to sorts of figures you see at federal elections. Keppel, Paul Houlihan has fallen to that seat in central Queensland. Logan has fallen to the LNP. Lytton, we've given away. Mansfield, LNP gain. Maryborough, we're now saying it's an LNP gain. I haven't had a close look at that, but certainly Chris Foley's primary vote has suffered badly as the surge to the LNP has occurred at this election. So there could be 2 independents who've fallen to the LNP at this election. On to the next page. It's a long list. Morayfield, Scott Ryan has lost. Oh, it's not Scott Ryan. Ryan Scott, I think. I'm sorry, I
Press on.
Morayfield has fallen. Mark Ryan. Apologies to Mr. Ryan. Mount Cootha, the LNP, Andrew Fraser's defeated. Mount Isa has fallen to Rob Katter. Mount Omni has been won by the LNP, as has Mundingburra and Marumba. Dean Wells out of Parliament after being there since 1986. Nanango is definitely in an LNP gain. Nudgee has fallen to the LNP. Who'd have thought the LNP could win Nudgee? There are seats here that have fallen that didn't fall in 1974. That's just how big the swing is here. And on to the next page. How many more? Pine Rivers has fallen. Palmerston has fallen again in that band north of Brisbane, between Brisbane and Caboolture. Redcliffe has gone back to the LNP. It fell to the Liberal Party for 1 term at a by-election, but it's gone back. Sandgate, a Labor seat, takes in half of Wayne Swan's seat of Lily, and as does Nudgee. I'm sure people will be noticing that tomorrow. Southport, Peter Lawler couldn't withstand that. Springwood, again, has fallen to the LNP. Stafford, as we saw earlier, Stirling Hinchliffe. Stretton, where Stephen Robertson is retiring, has fallen to the LNP with a Labor vote split between 2 candidates. And on to the next page, Sunnybank, where Judy Spence, one of the 89ers, is retiring at this election. That seat's 21% swing. Thuringowa, another one of those seats in Townsville. Toowoomba North, Kerry Shine couldn't withstand the swing. Townsville has also fallen, so the LNP has swept Townsville. Waterford, down in the Logan City, Waterford has fallen, the most marginal of the Logan City seats. That's fallen. Whitsunday, there was no way Jan Jarrett was going to withstand. That's the Minister for Tourism is defeated. And Yeerongpilly, we haven't given away yet. It's just listed as ahead. Yeerongpilly is still too close to call. And that may well come down to how the pre-poll and postal votes, which were cast before the last week when the polls turned really bad, may yet determine the result in Yeerongpilly.
Paul Lucas, one thing we haven't talked about tonight was that right at the start of your campaign you had that dreadful ruckus in Canberra where Kevin Rudd tried to get back the Prime Ministership, which would have been an enormous distraction. Two questions. How much of a distraction was it for your campaign? And secondly, would it have made any difference to your vote if Kevin Rudd had become Prime Minister?
Look, to take the last question first, I don't know. Kevin certainly is popular in Queensland, there's no doubt about that at all. But look, that is something that you could only speculate on. I don't think it would have made any appreciable difference, let's be brutally honest about it. But certainly what it did do is it took away a week of campaigning from us. And it was something that you don't need. It takes momentum, it distracts the media, and those are the sorts of things that Jeff's having a nice little smile here.
For us too. Took it away from us. Took it away from us too.
Yeah, but you're in front. You're always happy to have it, to be honest. If you're in front, you can have a distraction, that's no problem.
Yeah.
But it certainly did distract from what was happening, and that then puts you off message. Anna, having said that, campaigned very strongly thereafter. But look, it wasn't helpful. We didn't need it, and we would have preferred if it didn't happen at that point in time. If people want to have a fight federally, do it, but not in the middle of our election.
Now this might have been a purely Queensland vote about Queensland by Queensland, but nonetheless, this is also a devastating result for Julia Gillard to have to deal with federally.
Well, look, if you have a look at the tradition of Queensland, Queensland premiers, when there are opposing governments, love Canberra bashing, and no doubt that will be the state sport that will then present itself to Mr Newman as the future premier. Can I say this though, that I think I certainly have seen post the leadership issues they had a few weeks ago in Canberra, and a far greater seriousness about winning elections. A far greater seriousness. I think Bob Carr has actually made a difference. Not so much that Bob Carr is so good, and he is, but he's actually made them finally realise that when you get unified and you work together, then you can actually do far better. People don't like Tony Abbott, actually, and this gives us an opportunity to learn from these lessons. The Labor Party learns.
Now, Jeff Seeney, can Tony Abbott draw comfort from this? Was there any aspect of this that was that reflects his invitation to Queenslanders to treat it as a referendum on the carbon tax?
Oh, I think it's certainly something that Tony Abbott can draw comfort from, in that it demonstrates the Queensland electorate's attitude towards Labor. And I think he can take a degree of comfort from that. The carbon tax was an issue here in Queensland because it adds to the cost of living, and it's seen to add to that cost of living pressure that is already being imposed or already being felt by so many Queenslanders. So it was certainly an issue, but I wouldn't think. I think it's drawing the bow a bit far to say it was a referendum on the carbon tax. But it's one of many issues.
Okay, now one of the other players in this campaign, of course, and he's been a big figure in Queensland politics one way and another for a very long time, was Bob Katter and his new party. And Bob Katter is standing by to talk now with Jessica.
Thanks, Kerry. Bob Katter, you said at the start of this campaign, or you predicted that your party would poll better than Pauline Hanson's One Nation over a decade ago. That hasn't happened. You've got about 12% of the primary vote and you've only secured 2 seats. It hasn't gone
No,
well
we've secured
here.
3 seats. I think that's fairly confidently we can claim. Thurrangower, the ALP allocated preferences. They put out a ballot paper with preferences on it in that seat. I don't want to,
Even still...
3's not fantastic. But no, we have established ourselves now as a very real force. In 15 seats, we were over 20%. I'd say in 30 or 40 seats, we were over 15%, obviously, and we didn't contest 13 seats.
You've lost the state leader of your party, though, in Aidan McClendon in Beaudesert. What does that mean?
That was no surprise to us. Aiden was on 16% at the start when we amalgamated the parties and we started our party effectively. He fought back and he picked up 11%. It was a tigerish and very laudable performance on his part, but it wasn't good enough to pull back the lead that the LNP had.
We've established
a third force in Queensland politics. But I would say we're the opposition. I mean, there are two parties that are both free market, both pro-Woolworths, both coal seam gas, both in favour of bringing overseas foreign workers in to work our coal fields. We are exact opposite in every one of these. So now the Australian people have an alternative on preferential voting. Remember, this is optional preferential. On compulsory preferential voting, we would win 7 seats on those figures that I've seen tonight. I may be proved wrong because I haven't had time to analyse them properly, but we would win 7 to 12 seats.
One of the key points of difference...
You take up my point. We're a very formidable force now.
I'd like to move on to policy area. One of the key points of difference was coal seam gas between Katter's Australian Party and the major parties. Why hasn't that apparently resonated in more seats?
I think that is absolutely true. Aiden emphasised that, but it wasn't an issue. At the end of the day, clearly it wasn't an issue. He was the fighter and the tiger on that, and God bless him for it. But all of our aquifers in Queensland are now open to drilling. The LNP leader has made that quite clear. So regional Australia will unfortunately and sadly pay a terrible price for that decision tonight.
We've got a third generation Katter going into politics now with your son securing Mount Isa. What can we expect from him?
Pretty tough boy. He signed for the Cowboys at one stage.
He's not quite like you though, is he? He's not quite as colourful and outspoken.
He's only very, very young. I mean, I wasn't colourful and outspoken, and when I was his age, I can assure you.
Going on tonight's results, do you want to set up Katter's Australian parties in other states, federally? What is your plan?
We're already planning that right now. And there are most certainly 3, arguably 7 seats in New South Wales within our gun sites. But here in Queensland tonight, we've already established that on the figures that I've seen, and I must emphasise that I've not had time to sit down and analyse them, we would win 7 seats in Queensland. If we win 2 or 3 seats in another state, then most parliaments for the last 30 years, we'd have the balance of power, and we would use that muscle with enormous conviction and force.
All right, Mr. Katter, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. God bless all the listeners, and thank you very much for the people that worked so hard for the cause today. There is another force and another way out there. We've offered an alternative.
To Jeff Seeney and Paul Lucas, what about the coal seam gas, and what about the claim that if it wasn't the system that you have here with the preferences, that Bob Katter might have picked up 7 to 12 seats tonight?
Well, look, I'll let Jeff talk about the preferences. I haven't analysed that. I think that's unlikely. But I'll just say this, that if we took the resources sector out of the Australian economy, we'd end up like New Zealand. New Zealand and Australia both have great tourism, great primary production, and we have a resources sector that actually helps maintain our standard of living. The great challenge, and I think the Bligh government ought to be very proud of the work that we did with strategic cropping land and buffer zones, is for the current new government to carry that on, because the best thing that we can do in our primary production areas is to have coexistence. It's in the interests of everyone. You see jobs in those communities being created. And there's rubbish that Bob Katter's going on about overseas people mining. I tell you what, every time I go to a mining community, I don't see too many overseas people mining there. They've got a broad Australian accent. They don't mind telling you the benefit of their views when they don't like what you're doing.
Yeah, well, Kerry, unfortunately, like so many of Bob Katter's policies, if they were ever implemented, the people that would be hurt most are the people who vote for him.
Absolutely.
And so it is with the coal seam gas issue and his attitude to the resources industry.
But the resources industry didn't win any great brownie points in the way they handled the coal seam gas.
And look, Paul and I can both talk to you for a long time about that, but
we won't tonight.
And there's a whole range of issues there that have to be addressed, and they have to be addressed sensibly, not in the stupid knee-jerk way that Bob Katter advocates. in terms of winning 7 seats, he was never going to win 7 seats. It's a whole lot of nonsense. He's retained the seat of Dalrymple because of the entrenchment of Shane Carnouth. The LNP put an enormous amount of resources into Shane Carnouth and getting him entrenched into that seat, and we were never going to beat him in one election, even though everyone hates a traitor, and we would have loved to have beaten him. But Mount Isa has characteristics all of its own. So, Bob Catter has talked rubbish from day one, and he's talking rubbish again tonight.
We've got just a few things left to cover with our coverage tonight. Now we've got the seat of Greenslopes, where Cameron Dick, the Labor Attorney General and potential leader of the party, has lost his seat. And we might just take a very quick look at this, Anthony, before we cross to Cameron Dick.
Well, the swing is substantially lower than at some other electorates, but Ian Kay, local police officer in the district, has defeated the Education Minister, Cameron Dick. The swing's just above what's needed, and it's enough to deliver the seat, unless there's something remarkable with the postals. But at this stage, it looks like Cameron Dick has been defeated.
And Jessica Van Vonderen is going to talk to Cameron Dick right now.
Thanks, Kerry. Cameron Dick, was this the result you were preparing for?
Look, Jessica, I think all of us in the Labor Party read the polls. We knew how difficult this election was going to be. We worked as hard as we possibly could, but the reality is, in Greenslopes, we ran a very strong community campaign, not just Labor Party members and trade unionists, but mums and dads, men and women of this electorate who gave their name and their heart to me to work as hard as we could. As a result, we just missed out, but I accept the decision of the people and I respect that.
This is a resounding, if not humiliating, defeat, to not mince words. What lessons does Labor have to learn from this?
Oh, I think you're right. It's an absolutely devastating result for the Labor Party tonight. There's no two ways about it. There's no way to sugarcoat what is a challenge for all of us in the Labor movement and in the Labor Party, is to reflect on how we ended up here, how we've ended up with a very small rump of members in the Parliament. But the reality for the Labor Party is that there is a reason it is Australia's oldest political organisation. There is a reason it's 120 years old, and that's because we have learnt from the past. We are an adaptable, flexible party that reflects the needs of the community. We obviously haven't done that or done it the way the Queenslanders of today want us to do, but we need to change. And I'd like to be part of that change in the future.
How do you need to change?
Well, we need to look at the reasons for this result, and there'll be a lot of reflection. We need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to respect very much the decision of the Queensland community. We need to accept this result. We need to reflect on it. I think there'll be a lot of soul searching in the party, but we will move on.
And what about Anna Bligh's role in all of this? John McKell has suggested that she has to take responsibility. What do you think about those comments?
Look, when you're a member of the government and you're a member of the parliamentary party, each and every one of us has to take our share of responsibility. So I won't shirk from my share of responsibility as a member of the Cabinet and the government. Obviously, the leadership of the party, the leaders play a significant role in setting the decisions and the direction of the government, but we all accept responsibility for this defeat.
Who is best placed to lead Labor in opposition now?
Look, there are a couple of talented ministers who I understand will be continuing on in the Parliament. Anastasia Palaszczuk, the Transport Minister, and I understand Curtis Pitt from Far North Queensland may be continuing on. They are very talented people. I've worked closely with them in the Parliament. I think they're someone that the parliamentary party should look to, but ultimately I'm a respecter of the traditions and history of our party, and it's the state parliamentary party who'll make that decision in due course.
Cameron Dick in Greenslopes, thanks very much.
Thanks, Jess.
Now, this has been a remarkable journey from the Brisbane City Council to State Parliament for Campbell Newman. It's been a remarkable journey for the fledgling Liberal National Party, the LNP, which was an amalgamation of the Liberal and National Party, something they'd resisted for a long time, but a remarkable journey with spectacular success for the LNP tonight. And Jessica Van Vonderen has one last interview with James McGrath, their campaign director.
James McGrath, you don't give many interviews, so I appreciate your time. You've run a number of election campaigns. This must be your most successful.
It's a bit of a surprise, but Queensland has had a clear choice. Had a choice between 20 years of Labor's bungles, lies, waste and incompetence, or a choice with Campbell Newman and his contract for Queensland for more jobs, less waste and better services. And it shows what happens when a party comes together and forgets about its past disputes and has a fresh vision for Queensland.
Is it something that the LNP did right in the course of this campaign, or was it more that Queenslanders just had the bats out for the Bligh government?
I think it comes back to the choice. They had a choice to give Labor another 3 years, and when you look at the previous 20 years of their bungles, their lies, their waste and incompetence, or Campbell, and Campbell had a fresh vision for Queensland. He had his contract for Queensland. He, in terms of our advertising, over 2/3 of our advertising was positive. It was about our 5 pledges. It was about rebuilding a 4-pillar economy. So Queenslanders, yes, punish Labor, and Labor deserve to be punished, but they've also given Campbell and the LNP a mandate, and the mandate that starts tomorrow. And Campbell said tonight his work starts tomorrow, and we're all going to see that. Tomorrow's day one.
You mentioned earlier that this was about the LNP coming together. Is there a message for other states around the country, an example that they can follow with the Liberal National parties merging as they have done here in Queensland?
Oh, look, I don't think it's for me to comment what happens outside the borders of Queensland, but Queensland has a unique but Queensland has a unique political history, and for 20 years we were punished because of our failure to come together. And what the last 3 or 4 years since the formation of the LNP has shown that two parties have come together, have put aside their differences and gone, let's move forward. A new vision, new people, and Campbell Newman.
Can I just ask briefly about the pre-selection process? You did have some problem with candidates, particularly around Broadwater, although in the end it would appear that hasn't had an impact anyway. But do you need to re-examine that vetting and pre-selection process?
Well, I think the people of Queensland have answered that question in terms of the mandate they've given to local members of local Liberal National Party candidates who have been elected across the state.
All right, James McGrath, thanks very much.
No worries, cheers, thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. As we've been saying for some hours now, this is the most sensational single election in terms of the dramatic nature and the size of a swing, certainly that I've covered. I suspect the same for Anthony. And we've seen the LNP pick up 44 seats tonight, going from 31 to 75 as it stands at the moment. And at this moment, Labor has still only got 6 certain seats. That's the nature of the game tonight, and you've been part of a historic event, Paul Lucas and Jeff Feeney. So thank you very much for your contributions tonight.
Thanks, Terry.
Each have got different things to contemplate as you go away, but congratulations, Jeff Feeney, and thank you both.
Thank you very much, Kerry.
Now we're going to go to the call of the board with Anthony and Jessica, which is where we take you through every seat in the state. So whatever electorate you're in, this is where you get your final information from the night on your seat.
Yes, that's right. It's time for the call of the board, and there is a sea of blue there, but we'll start in the seat of Albert. And
this is the Northern Gold Coast, and this is the first of the seats that have fallen to the LNP. Mark Boothman is the new member for Albert, just under 50% of the vote, but Margaret Keach has been defeated there with a swing of 18%. And in Algester in southern Brisbane, Anthony Shorten, at his second attempt, wins the seat, defeating Karen Struthers, the Minister for Community Services, in a swing of 18.6% there. The third seat on the list is Ashgrove, of course, the one that we watched so closely in the campaign, but Campbell Newman has easily won the electorate, 52.9 to Kate Jones, 35.9. A big victory there for Campbell Newman, the new Premier. The fourth seat is Aspley. This was one of the seats Labor lost at the last election, and clearly there was a Tracy Davis, 65.9% of the first preferences. A swing of 17% in that electorate and an easy victory for Tracy Davis. Into the Bs, Barron River. Steve Wettenhall has been defeated, easily defeated there. Michael Trout has finished first on first preferences, 45% of the vote really. 12% swing to the LNP. It looks like Michael Trout will win Barron River.
And Beaudesert is next.
Well, Aidan McLinden's switches of party have not paid off. He's on 27%. John Krause will be the new member for Beaudesert, winning that seat back for the National Party after Aidan McLinden's term for various parties. But yeah, big win there for John Krause.
Brisbane Central, that was Peter Beattie's old seat, but Grace, how did she go?
Yes, well, it's gone too. Robert Cavalucci is easily victorious there, 48.6%. 15% there for the Greens, but Robert Cavalucci easily wins that seat. Grace Jones's first preference votes down 7, after preferences 10% swing. So Brisbane Central, I don't think Labor's won any seats north of the Brisbane River.
Broadwater, the LNP secured that one by the looks, despite its earlier candidate troubles.
Yes, Verity Barton, after only a couple of weeks as a candidate, is in Parliament. Ron Clark, the Mayor of the Gold Coast, only got 4.5% of the votes. So despite all the candidate problems, I don't think the swing is as big in Broadwater as some other Gold Coast seats. Certainly Peter K. Croft is defeated by Verity Barton.
Butterham on the Sunshine Coast, this was an LNP seat and remains so.
You know, Steve Dixon may have a chance of, he's Shadow Minister for Energy and Water Utilities, will have a chance of being in the new ministry. He's easily, no one else got above 20% in that context, a very safe LNP seat.
And here's a rare exception, Bulimba.
At this stage, on our preference count, we've got Di Farmer slightly ahead. She's 3.4% behind, but if she gets a strong flow of green preferences and the preference counts we're getting indicating that is the case, then Di Farmer will win the seat. Aaron Dillaway, of course, is the candidate that stood aside for Campbell Newman in Ashgrove. So if he misses out in Bulimba, he'll be rather cranky. Well, I'm sure he'll be happy for the party, but personally, he may miss out. At this stage, he's well ahead, but this is one seat where the preferences will be important. Our preference counts show Di Farmer ahead by 83 votes at this stage of the night.
One to keep watching then. Bundaberg next.
Jack Dempsey's been easily returned there. Significant vote there for Doug Anderson for the Australian Party, but in the end, it's nowadays, it was once a Labor Party heartland, but these days it's much more of an LNP seat.
Bundamba, looks like this one might stay in Labor hands, also Labor heartland.
Oh, truly enormous swing of 19%, but Joanne Miller still stays well ahead. Michael Kitzelman, 36% of the vote, roughly. There's a range of votes there for other candidates, and that, a lot of that will exhaust. So Joanne Miller, despite being forced to preferences and suffering a 19% swing, will remain as the member for Bundamba.
Burdekin, looks like a pretty big swing to Katter's Australian Party there, but Rosemary Menkins staying put.
Rosemary Menkins will be re-elected. The preference count in Burdekin has been suppressed by the Electoral Commission because Katter's Australian Party finished second. But even with Labor's preferences, Rosemary Menkins won't be headed in that contest. She's returned as a member for Burdekin. Of course, that was one of the electorates that fell to One Nation in the 1990s.
Burleigh on the southern Gold Coast.
Christine Smith couldn't withstand the swing, and Michael Hart, at his third attempt, enters the Parliament as the member for Burleigh.
Burnett, we had an independent MP there, Rob Messenger. He also used to be with the LNP, but it looks like he hasn't been able to hang on there.
Yes, in Burnett, Steve Bennett is the new member for the LNP. Rob Messenger, I suspect, just swamped by the pro-LNP vote across the whole state at this election, and even with preferences from other candidates, he's far too behind, and Stephen Bennett will be the new member for Burnett, putting it back into the LNP fold.
Cairns, Desley Boyle, the member there, was retiring this time around, and that seat was in Labor hands for 100 years, wasn't it?
Yes, 1904 they first won it. Gavin King, the Labor Party, tried to get a lot of controversy about him, but this is one of the seats where the LNP vote hasn't risen at all. In fact, it's fallen. In North Queensland, the Katter factor is important. Darren Hunt, who was quite a good candidate for them, has got 19% of the vote. Gavin King will be forced to preferences, but he will win after the distribution of those preferences, and is in the Parliament.
Jeff Seeney probably never going to have any troubles in Callide.
Well, he's let the team down a bit because he's had a swing against him, mainly because the Steve Ensby, the Australian Party candidate, passed Labor, which results in a notional swing against him, but Jeff Seeney still got over 50% of the first preference vote.
Caloundra on the Sunshine Coast.
This is Joan Sheldon's old seat. Mark McArdle's held it for several terms. Former Liberal Party leader. He's Shadow Minister for Health. He should be a minister in the new government, and he's won an enormous victory there.
Capalaba in the Redlands area outside of Brisbane.
Well, Michael Choi's been defeated here. Steve Davies is he's a local small businessman. He's won Capalaba. I think it's the first time in history it's fallen to the LNP.
Chatsworth, this is always a pretty marginal Labor seat, and no surprise, I guess, if that's gone the LNP's way.
Well, we're not starting to see how much personal vote Terry McEnroth had in that seat, because since he's gone, this has been a marginal seat. Steve Kilburn did well to hold it last time against the swing. This time he couldn't hang on. Steve Minnikin is the new LNP member for Chatsworth.
Clayfield, and here we've got the LNP's Tim Nichols, who Campbell Newman has said is going to be his treasurer.
Well, 63% of the vote. This puts Clayfield back to where, it includes Albion and that sort of very good, solid Liberal territory, and it sort of extends more into the past the airport there. But look, that's a huge victory for him. 15% swing, and he's got a margin of over, let me see, after preferences, 70.9. He's got a 20% margin in Clayfield.
And a big swing to Mark Robinson by the looks in Cleveland too.
I should say Cleveland was a Labor, Clayfield was a Labor seat 2 terms ago. Mark Robinson, he gained this at the last election very narrowly after 2 weeks of counting of postals and absence. He doesn't have to worry tonight. He's got 62% of the first preference votes and an 18% swing. Jo Brisky is the daughter of the former Labor member for the seat, Darryl Brisky.
How's Condamine in the Darling Downs looking?
Condamine, Ray Hopper, he had trying to remember, there was another LNP candidate who stood against, Stuart Copeland stood against him in the last election. This time, Canada's Australian Party has finished second, but Ray Hopper's got well over 50% of the first preferences and easily wins the seat. That was a seat where I was told so often that the coal seam gas was going to be an issue, but it turns out not to have been.
Up to far north Queensland then, and to Cook.
Well, we couldn't call Cook until we got the last of the mobile boos from the far north, Torres Strait and the northern Indigenous communities, but in the end, David Kempton is ahead on first preferences, and he will go on to win that electorate after preferences from a very low 37.7% of the vote. But basically, once we had that far northern vote in, we could call it for Labor. Until then, for the LNP. Until then, it remained doubtful. It's now been won by David Kempton.
The Gold Coast, back to the Gold Coast with Coomera.
A notional Labor seat before the last election is now very solidly in the LNP fold, with Michael Crandon re-elected for a second term. And
still on the Gold Coast, Currumbin.
It's Mary Rose's old seat, but it's not much of a Labor seat anymore. Jan Stuckey, it's 58% of the first preference vote has easily been returned.
Next is one of Katta's Australian Party's few areas of success in Dalrymple. And in Dalrymple, Shane Knuth's got over 50% of the vote and has easily won that electorate. So in Dalrymple, along with Mount Isa, it looks like being one of the 2 Katta's Australian Party candidates, members of Parliament. Back to Brisbane again and to Everton, which is right next door to Ashgrove, and so got completely overshadowed during the course of the campaign. And Murray Watt, after 1 term, is defeated by Tim Mander, the former rugby league referee. He'll now have to bring his skills, more recent years' skills as a video referee to the Parliament. Maybe he'll be a speaker if he's a former referee. Could be the perfect job for him. Not first term. Ferny Grove, we've got another Labor minister who's lost his seat here. Health Minister Jeff Wilson defeated by Dale Shuttleworth, who's been elected to Parliament at his 3rd attempt. Back to the Gold Coast in Gavin. Well, Alex Douglas won this at a by-election, lost at the 2006 election, gained it in 2009, and has now romped home with 70% of the vote after preferences. He's got over 50% of the first preference votes. Liz Cunningham in Gladstone, a very popular independent MP. I guess no surprise that she's still there. Yeah, she's lost a little bit of vote, but I think essentially she's again caught up by that LNP push. The LNP announced a candidate very late, which was a bit of a surprise. But in the end, Liz Cunningham's got just under 50 and wins the seat easily. To the Sunshine Coast, Hinterland and Glasshouse. Right, huge vote here. Big vote for the Greens, 16%, not far behind Ryan Moore. There was a lot of controversy in this area about the number of Labor candidates from outside. I think there was a couple of the Moore brothers were both from, I think, Townsville and standing in the Sunshine Coast. Andrew Powell, who's the Shadow Minister for the Environment, is easily returned in Glasshouse. Now to Greenslopes, Cameron Dick was the Education Minister, not anymore. No, he's been defeated by local policeman Ian Kay, and Cameron Dick's been defeated, another loss for a potential Labor Party leader. Out to Western Queensland in Gregory. And in Gregory, let's have a look, Gregory. Vaughan Johnson easily home with 57%. Jack O'Brien, I think there was some controversy that he never actually visited the electorate, and he certainly didn't visit it during the campaign, and Vaughan Johnson has easily been returned there in Gregory. To Gympie, where David Gibson from the LNP keeps that seat. And as I thought might happen, Shane Palger from the Katta's Australian Party has finished second in that electorate, but Dave Gibson's got over 50% of the vote and he's easily returned. Harvey Bay with Ted Sorensen. Oh, look, this is a massive victory. He won it with a big swing last time, defeating Andrew McNamara, the minister at the time, but Ted Sorensen has easily won the electorate this time. Hinchinbrook, I think there was a bit of talk from Katta's Australian Party that they were hoping to do quite well there, but Andrew Cripps. Well, Andrew Cripps will win. He's got 43% of the vote. Jeff Knuth, the former One Nation member,
He's on 36, but it's been quite a tussle there. But Andrew Cripps will win because there's no way that you can close that gap on exhausted Labor preferences.
Inala next, and perhaps the opposition leader here.
Anastasia Palaszczuk has been easily returned there. Forced the preferences, which is a long time since Inala has been done that, but her father was the member for the district before her, and Anastasia Palaszczuk, the Minister for Transport, soon to be not the Minister for Transport, easily re-elected.
Indooroopilly, Brisbane's western suburbs.
The Greens have finished second in this electorate. Scott Emerson, former journalist and public relations advisor, Shadow Minister for Transport, has been easily elected to Indooroopilly, a traditional Liberal electorate which spent 3 terms in the hands of Ronan Lee for the Labor Party and the Greens there in the early half of this decade.
A huge swing against Labor in Ipswich, and another former minister gone.
Yes, Rachel Nolan's vote's been really eaten into her. First preference vote is down 30%. She's lost half of the Labor first preference vote. Ian Berry, the surge hasn't been towards the LNP. Their vote's only up 6%. But the loss of all those votes to other minor parties has really damaged Rachel Nolan, and Ian Berry will win. He's well ahead on the preference counts we've received.
And still in Ipswich, Wayne Went in Ipswich West. What's happened to him?
Well, Wayne Went's gone. Sean Choate is at his 3rd attempt. He's the new LNP member for Ipswich West. But no, as I said, Wayne Went's gone.
Kalanga?
Trevor Ruthenberg has defeated Mary Ann O'Neill, got over 50% of the vote. The area north of Brisbane, heading off to the Liberal Party where it's been at many recent federal elections. So that's a big win for Trevor Ruthenberg with a swing of 17.5%.
Jared Blahey returned in Kawana on the Sunshine Coast with an improved margin.
Well, he's got 2/3 of the first preference vote. Thanks for coming, everybody else. It's one of those sorts of contests tonight. Jared Blahey is back in Parliament. He's the Shadow Attorney General. He might have a bit of competition for that job, I think, if he's after the job in government. There's a few high-profile lawyers coming on this election.
Absolutely. Keppel in central Queensland.
Well, Paul Houlihan has been defeated by the NMP's Bruce Young. And he's a former diesel fitter who now runs a cattle property north of Yeppoon. And Bruce Young has been elected as member for Keppel.
Lockyer in southern Queensland, staying in LNP hands.
Yes, and Ian Rickus he's got over 50% of the vote. Dave, I think it's Neindorf, has finished second for Caddis Australian Party, but that won't prevent Ian Rickus for winning Lockyer. Of course, an area which is heavily affected by the floods last year.
To Logan now, and John McKell, the retiring MP, they're making some controversial, perhaps, comments tonight about Labor's election loss. But what's happened in Logan?
Well, we've got a new member here, Michael Pucci, who's a former US Marine who moved here a number of years ago after marrying a Brisbane girl, and he only came in as candidate a couple of weeks ago when the previous candidate stood aside for other issues. But he's now in State Parliament, which is quite an upset. This is Wayne Goss's old seat, of course, so it's quite a gain for the LNP.
Well, Lytton was Paul Lucas's old seat, but he's retiring, and now it's in LNP hands.
Yes, it's in LNP. So there was a bit of doubt earlier on about whether numbers. Neil Symes was the youngest LNP candidate at this election. I think he was only 22. Yes, he's 22. He's defeated Daniel Cheverton, who was the new Labor Party candidate. But a very young member for Neil Symes. Neil Symes is the new member for Lytton.
Things still looking in doubt in Mackay?
I think... Oh, geez, it's a very close contest now. I think Tim Mulherron is advantaged by being ahead on the first preferences, but I think there's been a bit of a leakage of Caddis Australian Party candidates' preferences to the LNP, and at this stage it's a close contest.
Mansfield, yet another minister out?
I was going to say, I think you'd favour Mulherron on preferences. Yes, Ian Walker, very high-profile barrister in Brisbane, former managing partner of a senior Brisbane legal firm. He's defeated Sport and Child Safety Minister Phil Reeves in a seat which Labor wouldn't normally hold in opposition.
Maroochydore next on the Sunshine Coast.
Interesting. Fiona Simpson here, easily returned. We haven't mentioned it much. Ray Barber is a former member for Karura and in fact succeeded Fiona's father, Gordon Simpson, in 1989, and Ray Barber lost Noosa in 1992. So he's had another go 20 years later and lost to Fiona Simpson. She's back in the Parliament.
Pretty significant swing against Chris Foley, the independent in Maryborough.
Yes, and I think Chris Foley will lose this contest. I don't think there's enough preferences coming towards him. Let me have a look here. He's at the end of the night. He's 43 votes behind, so there'll be a lot of counting to come in that election. He won't be assisted by the absent vote. I think we've got some. We've got a lot of pre-poll votes which put him much further behind, but the preference count we've got doesn't include the the pre-poll votes. I think Chris Foley's in a great deal of difficulty there, but it's I think we can leave that one in doubt.
So in a situation like that, will that go on for a few days before we have a result?
There's how many? There's several thousand pre-poll votes that have been counted, but there's no preference count for them, so we don't know how they factor in. They will continue to count preferences in that seat because it's close. The doubtful seats will continue to have preference counts counted.
Mermaid Beach on the Gold Coast.
Ray Stevens easily returned. It's a very safe one. This is Bob Quinn's old seat. It's been always been an LNP Conservative seat. It's never been won by Labor, and it's been won by Ray Stevens, another former Gold Coast mayor.
Morani in central Queensland. Ted Malone is back.
Yeah, there were some funny early figures there, but Ted Malone in the end has won. Jim Pearce got 29%, big vote there for the Australian Party. There was some interest in Scott. He got a much smaller swing than some other seats, but clearly Jim Pearce, his personal vote just wasn't going to get him over the line in that electorate.
Bruce Flegg extending his margin in Moggill in Brisbane's western suburbs.
Easily returned. This is by far the safest Liberal seat in Brisbane. Although I think he might be beaten on 74% after preferences, so it'll be the safest seat again.
Moray Field in Caboolture, north of Brisbane.
I was having trouble with the name earlier, but Mark Ryan is the one-term member there. He's been defeated in this seat that was only created in 2009. Darren Grimwade is the new LNP member. He runs a local business called Pizza Capers, so as a local businessman into Parliament from the district.
Andrew Fraser was future leadership material, but not in the Parliament anymore.
No, I'll have to find another seat because Saxon Rice has won that seat. Adam Stone, the Green, there was some talk of him passing Andrew Fraser. Well, they've both got the 20-23% the Greens normally get in an electorate. The shift has been from Labor to the LNP. The voters of Mount Coot-tha as well as the rest of the state have been very much focused on who's going to form government.
Now here's one of possibly two seats that Katter's Australian Party has secured with Mount Isa.
And they'll win it easily. He's far enough ahead of Betty King and the preferences won't matter. The LNP candidate will finish third and Rob Katter will win that seat. His father's machine will work for him on the postals and absence. I suspect Bob Katter's had the postal vote in his pocket for decades up there. He used to represent the area as the member for Flinders, so I suspect that the voters of Cloncurry, the farmers from outside of Cloncurry will all vote for Rob Katter.
Another 20+% swing to the LNP in Mount Omni in southwest Brisbane.
And Tanya Smith has won this seat back. It's one of the seats which is a sign of how well Labor's done over the last 2 decades, that they've held this. This is not a natural Labor seat. Julie Atwood retired, and Tanya Smith, who runs a local meat retailer, Meat to Eat, she's the new member for Mount Omni, and Ben Marzik has been defeated. He's a Together Union official.
I don't know how you remember all of those details, Anthony, but it's remarkable. Mudgeeraba in the Gold Coast hinterland, Ros Bates is back.
Well, Ros Bates had to scratch and bite to win this at a second attempt at the last election. She's just romped on this time. I can't remember the former Labor member, but she did well to hold it for 3 terms. Ros Bates, this seat is one that's gone home on the Gold Coast.
Curtis Pitt looking like keeping the family legacy going in Mulgrave?
Yes, I think it will. I think he will because he's far enough ahead that with lots of other preferences exhausting, he'll probably get home. The preference counts we've got are between Labor and the LNP, and I can't see the LNP vote dropping from this point. So we've got him ahead by 530 votes, though the pre-poll votes haven't had a preference count on them.
Mundingborough in the Townsville region, the Deputy Townsville Mayor David Crisafulli securing that seat. Yes, Crisafulli, it's got to the stage of the night where Martha's getting sore on some of these names. David Crisafulli has won that seat. Labor Party is still second. Might have been more interesting if the Katter's Australian Party got into second spot, but he will win that seat. David Crisafulli is a local councillor up there and a journalist and a lecturer in journalism at the university. A very long time sitting Labor MP in Dean Wells in Marumba booted out? Yes, he was originally a federal member for Petrie from 83 to 84, then he won Marumba in 1986. It's a seat that used to be held by Frank Nicklin, the former Premier from the 60s, but in those days it used to extend up into the Sunshine Coast. These days it's just Deception Bay in the areas and North Lakes in the area behind Redcliffe, and you can see there Reg Gully, who's a senior accountant at a local school in the district. He's easily won that seat with 49% of the vote. Katter's Australian Party had high hopes in Nanango, but looks like Carl Rackerman hasn't done enough there. This is another seat that the National LNP will think has gone home. This represents much of the area that Joe Bjelke-Petersen once held. It was originally known as Baramba. It was actually Nanango was the seat that Joe Bjelke-Petersen first won in 1947, and they changed that name in 1950. Deb Frecklington runs a solicitor's firm in Kingaroy. She's been easily re-elected. Dolly Pratt was the retiring member, the independent who's held the seat for many years. She's not well with multiple sclerosis, and we wish her all the best in her retirement. But it's
it's been a long time she's been there.
Nicklin in the Sunshine Coast hinterland. I'll be interested to see the wash-up for this, what Peter Wellington, the independent, did wrong there.
No, he's held him. He's held that seat.
Excuse me.
John Connolly is a former Australian
He's done
rugby...
nothing wrong then.
Former Wallaby coach. In fact, this is famous because John Howard came to launch Connolly's campaign on the same day that Kevin Rudd suddenly met up with Peter Slipper and completely swamped the story. But Peter Wellington, there's been quite a campaign against him. He's struggled because of the surge to the LNP. But he's held on there because he's got 5% ahead. He won't be passed on preferences. So Peter Wellington, we've got him 2,000 votes ahead after preferences, so he'll win easily.
Noosa on the Sunshine Coast.
Oh, the Greens have finished second. Jim McDonald has won many times up in that district. Kurt Hopkins, again, one of the Labor Party candidates on the Sunshine Coast who doesn't actually live in the district, I think he lives in Brisbane. But Glenn Elms, 58% of the vote, former radio executive, he's easily returned in that electorate that he won from the Labor Party 2 terms ago, 2 or 3.
Retiring Emergency Services Minister Neil Roberts held nudgy, but it's gone the LNP's way.
Jason Woodforth, he's one of the many people describe tonight as surprise or shock victors, because this is not the sort of seat you would expect the LNP to win, but they have won it tonight, and Jason Woodforth is the new LNP member for Nudgee.
Pine Rivers, north of Brisbane.
It's where Carolyn Mayle retired. Patrick Bullman, who's the head of the CEO of Parkinson's Queensland, has been easily defeated. I think it's Zeeth Holswich, who's worked in employment service, and he's working for Triggy Forest's Indigenous employment program. He won't have to worry about that now. He's a member of Parliament, winning Pine Rivers. Last held for the LNP by Yvonne Chapman in the 1980s. Many people remember Yvonne Chapman.
Change of hands in Palmerston.
Lisa France, a former environmental scientist who now runs as the principal licensee of a family estate agency on the Rabi Island. She's easily elected that seat. Karen Sullivan, her husband was defeated in the last federal election, John, and Karen has also now defeated an easy victory for the LNP there.
Lillian Van Litzenberg, I'll say that one for you, Anthony, to save you the tongue twister there.
Oh, that was easy. There's no Z's and C's in it, you know.
Oh, I see. She's lost Redcliffe.
And Scott Driscoll, who tried to win Kalanga 3 times in the 1990s for the Liberal Party. He's the national president of the United Retail Federation. He's won Redcliffe. The Liberal Party have been trying to win it for years. They did win it briefly at a by-election, and now they've won it back at the general election.
Redlands.
Well, Peter Darling had to wait 2 weeks to know he'd won last time. He's got 65% of the vote this time. He's got no difficulty being back in Parliament. A huge win for him there.
Rockhampton, Rob Schwarten retiring there, but the ALP looks like managing to keep hold of that one.
They will hold that seat. Bill Byrne has a long career in the Army. He resigned from the Army once he got pre-selection for the Labor Party. Labor Party's taking a huge hit. The first preference vote for Labor is down 20%. Swing after preferences is 14. But Rockhampton is Labor town, and it's one of the few Labor seats remaining at the end of the night.
Sandgate in northern Brisbane.
And one of those, which is normally a Labor seat, has fallen Vicky Darling, the Minister for the Environment, has been defeated by Kerry Millard, who, like in some of these seats, I don't know some of these candidates very well in some of these really safe Labor seats for the LNP. And I do wonder, I should ask Campbell Newman tomorrow the names of some of these members that have been elected, because I'm sure he may not have met many of them as well.
South Brisbane and Anna Bligh, that seat was looking a bit in doubt earlier, but she's retaining it in the end.
Once the West End booths came in, her first preference vote pulled ahead of the LNP, and Anna Bligh will win easily on Green preferences, 55% after preferences, substantially down on the past, but she has won the seat. I'm not sure any Labor members got 50% of the vote of this election, which is not surprising given the results.
Southern Downs and Lawrence Springborg, the MP, probably speculation now whether he'll be back on the front bench in government. And
Canada's Australian Party finished second there. This is, of course, the seat where the Labor Party disendorsed their 18-year-old candidate for having some views, which obviously no one bothers to check before they pre-selected him as a candidate. And Lawrence Springborg, he's got 80% of the vote after preferences, so that'll make him about the safest seat in the state.
To the Gold Coast again in Southport.
Peter Lawler was easily defeated there. He's stood, I think, 7 times. He's won 3 times, lost 4. This is the 4th time he's lost. Rob Mulhook is the new LNP member for Southport.
A nearly 20% swing against Barbara Stone in Springwood.
Well, Springwood is there's a band of seats on the north side of the motorway, Pacific Motorway, and they fell to the LNP. They fell won by the Nationals in the 80s. They fell to the Liberals and Nationals in 1995. And at this election, that whole band was always at risk. Barbara Stone has lost one of those seats, and John Grant, the Logan City Councillor has easily been elected as the member for Springwood.
Stafford and Chris Davis claiming another ministerial scalp.
Yes, he'll be leaving geriatric medicine behind as and now becoming the member for Stafford. So Dr. Chris Davis has easily defeated Sterling Hinchliffe.
Stretton in southern Brisbane.
Freya Ostapovich has won this now. You can see there the Labor Party had Duncan Pegg, their candidate, and David Ford, the candidate defeated in pre-selection. They've split the vote. I suspected there'd only been one Labor candidate. They may well have lost the seat anyway. But Freya Ostapovich, at the second attempt to enter Parliament, becomes the member for Stretton.
Sunnybank, this was Judy Spencer's old seat, but she retired at this election.
Yes, retirement of one of the 89ers sees the LNP pick this up. Mark Stewart, who runs what's described as an innovative signage company, is the new member for Sunnybank.
John Paul Langbrook in Surfers Paradise, the man that made way for Campbell Newman.
Well, at this stage, he's 0.1% ahead of the margin for Lawrence Springborg. Surfers Paradise and Southern Duns are traditionally the two safest seats. I think John Paul Langbrook has the highest first preference vote in the state, and after preferences, he's got 80.4. He's had a reasonable swing to him. It was already a very safe seat. So John Paul Langbrook is in the Parliament.
Thurrangower in North Queensland.
Now, there are some strange doubts here. We haven't got a preference card in this seat. As you can see, Sam Cox is ahead. Steve Toddashini is the Katters Australian Party candidate. If lots of Craig Wallace's preferences go, he's the Minister for Main Roads and he's finished third. A lot of his preferences flow to Toddashini. Toddashini could win that seat. I'd probably put my money on Sam Cox at this stage, but they'll have to recount the preferences on that one because they counted an LNP Labor finish tonight.
Toowoomba North.
Kerry Shine has been defeated in this contest. Trevor Watts, 49.6. This is his second attempt to win. He used to run a night spot in Toowoomba called Toombas. I don't think he still runs it, but he's into Parliament now.
And Toowoomba South.
Next door, Mike Horan has retired, the only LNP member to retire after so many years in opposition. Must be a mixed feeling for him tonight, but John McVeigh has easily won that seat for the LNP. Mike Horan retiring.
Townsville now, and Mandy Johnston out.
Yes, she's been defeated by John Hathaway, and he's easily won. It's 38-29 for the ALP, 22. Again, we see that all through North Queensland we've had a big vote for Katters Australian Party, and this is one of those seats. He will win the seat after the election.
No threat to Howard Hobbs in Warrego?
No, Howard Hobbs has been re-elected. The vote's split between three candidates. They're all on about 14%. Mark O'Brien, Mayor of local council up there, but he's finished fourth in the end. Look, Howard Hobbs is easily home. Longest serving member of the Parliament now. Waterford going from Labor to the LNP? Well, this is one of those seats. Mike Latter, who's described by the LNP as a third-generation family man. And he's sort of a small businessman. But Evan Moorhead has held that seat since 2006. I think that's easily fallen to the LNP as well. Whitsunday was a marginal Labor seat anyway, and obviously gone to the LNP. Jan Jarrett was never going to hold this seat. It was one that was going to go with government. Jason Costigan, I think he got sort of passed over as a football commentator with Foxtel. He used to call it the rugby league, but that's been passed over, and now he's got a new job in Parliament, so he won't need to call any football games for a while. Looks like Desley Scott has survived a pretty big swing against her in Woodridge. Yes, she's got about the highest first preference vote for Labor in the state, but this has long been Labor's safest seat. Desley Scott is in Parliament. She's easily held that seat. 9% for Family First. That's the highest vote I've seen for them across the state. Yurong Pili in southern Brisbane. This one's in doubt at the end of the night. At the end of the night, Carl Judge, the LNP candidate, is 320 votes ahead. We don't have a preference count on the pre-polls, so it's a bit hard to know how that will finish. But yeah, that one remains in doubt with the LNP ahead. If the LNP haven't put enough effort into their postal and pre-poll campaigns in some of these safe Labor seats, then Simon Finn might get back. But he's a long way behind on first preferences and requires a lot of Green preferences, so he may be in trouble. He is in trouble.
That completes our coverage for tonight. 70% of the votes counted over the night across the state, and a huge swing away from Labor to the LNP of 14.5% in two-party preferred terms, and a huge transfer of seats to the Liberal National Party, as you've just been watching. My thanks to Anthony Green, Jessica Van Vonderen, Joe O'Brien and all the other members of the ABC production team who have contributed mightily to this effort. On this historic night when the baton of power changed hands emphatically, we'll leave you with a look back at the Labor years in Queensland and the night that brought them to a close. Good night.
I start tonight by congratulating the Liberal National Party on what is an historic victory for them, and I acknowledge that. I congratulate the leader of the LNP, Campbell Newman. I believe that being Premier of the best state of Australia is a great honour.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all Queenslanders this evening for voting for change.
A landslide win for the Coalition in Queensland and a new Premier to take the helm.
We will keep our promises and we will not let you down.
Anna Bligh concedes defeat and accepts responsibility for her party's loss.
Friends, Queenslanders today have decisively endorsed change. Clearly a change of government, but I think they've emphatically also endorsed a message of change for the Labor Party.
Also, police expect to charge the skipper of a fishing trawler after it runs aground in Victoria's Port Phillip Bay. And the AFL's new team, Greater Western Sydney Giants, go down fighting to the Sydney Swans in their debut match. This is ABC News 24. Good evening. I'm Richard Davies. A quick look at tomorrow's weather first. The chance of a shower in Brisbane and Sydney, sunny in Canberra, partly cloudy in Melbourne, Hobart and Adelaide, showers in Perth and also in Darwin. There's been a change of government in Queensland, with Labor losing power. LNP leader Campbell Newman has declared victory in a poll that saw a huge swing against Labor. A short time ago, with around 70% of the vote counted, the Coalition had around 75 seats. Labor had won 6, with exit polls predicting the party will be left with 10 or fewer seats in an 89-seat parliament. That's a 13% swing against the Labor government. Well, Premier-elect Campbell Newman won the seat of Ashgrove and gave his victory speech from Brisbane's Hilton Hotel.
I pledge to you that we will conduct ourselves with humility, grace and dignity. We will work for all Queenslanders regardless of their vote tonight. Tonight I acknowledge that many of you have never voted for the Liberal Party, never voted for the National Party before and never voted for the LNP. So I thank you for your support. It's an honour that you would trust us with this responsibility by handing us that vote. Thank you. The priority of our government is to get our economy moving and to sort out our state's finances. We don't for a moment underestimate the magnitude of the task ahead. It will be long, it will be hard, but we're going to get on and deliver on that job, starting with tomorrow. The job starts tomorrow. It starts tomorrow morning, and we're determined to do it together with all Queenslanders from across this great state. We're determined that Queenslanders will walk tall as citizens of the greatest state in the greatest country. Now, I have a few people from the ACT with me, and you look... Did you? Well, yes, but you noticed they looked a bit uncomfortable. Well, we don't care, do we? I want to acknowledge and thank the Premier for her service to Queensland, and particularly I think it's appropriate this evening that we all thank her and particularly acknowledge her inspirational leadership during the 2011 floods and Cyclone Yasi. So would you please applaud the Premier? I also want to acknowledge my opponent, Kate Jones for her service and hard work to the people of Ashgrove since she's been the elected member. To my wife, Lisa. My family, Lisa, Rebecca and Sarah, and to our wider family. Thank you for your love and support. I'm so very proud of you, okay? Thank you for your forbearance and patience. I've thanked my mum. She's part of my wider family. I didn't like the look she took when I talked about Queensland before, mate. To my friends and colleagues, Jeff, Sini and Tim Nichols, I'm proud of what we've achieved together over the last year and 3 days, but who's counting? But I'm particularly proud of what I know that we and other members of the team will achieve for Queenslanders in the years to come. To my parliamentary colleagues and to all our candidates, well done. Well done. But understand this, the job starts tomorrow. To Bruce McIver, to Gary Spence, to James McGrath, Michael O'Dwyer, to you, ladies and gentlemen, and the 14,000 members of the Liberal National Party. You have, through your efforts, delivered this change for Queensland. Finally, to all Queenslanders, thank you once again. This is all about you. It will always be about you. With your support, with the support of all Queenslanders, we pledge tonight to make this great state a can-do place once more. Thank you.
Well, former Premier Anna Bligh conceded defeat only hours after polling stations closed when the extent of the swing against Labor became clear.
We in Labor here in Queensland, I think, can be very proud that when Queensland gave us a chance to shape our state, we didn't waste a moment. We took every chance to transform the place and to build a better and fairer place. Every achievement that we have made has been driven by Labor values, our passion for equality of opportunity. These are the values that drive me, and I know they're the values that drive every member of our party. Together, we have built much more than a legacy. We have built a rock-solid foundation for a better Queensland. There is so much to be proud of, but for me, I think our proudest moment in the past few years has been the moment when we stood together and shoulder to shoulder we confronted our worst ever natural disasters, and together we have recovered and we have rebuilt. It was a moment when we stood tall in the eyes of the nation and in the eyes of the world, and it is a moment that we will forever remember. In the coming days and months, there will be plenty of commentary and analysis about this election, and tonight I just want to make a couple of points. Firstly, there is a cycle in politics. The momentum for change grows and grows and becomes more and more powerful. Friends, it was there in 2006, it was there in 2009, and on both occasions we defied gravity. But by 2012 it had simply become overwhelming. No doubt the issue of asset sales will feature in that commentary. And I want to say that it is true that these were very painful for Labor. But I know in my heart that they were absolutely necessary to hold on to jobs during the GFC, and I will never regret doing what had to be done to protect our government building program and the 200,000 jobs of Queenslanders that went with it. But it is equally true that I was simply unable to bring the community and the wider Labor movement with me on this issue, and as leader I accept responsibility for that. Friends, Queenslanders today have decisively endorsed change. Clearly a change of government, but I think they've emphatically also endorsed a message of change for the Labor Party. Our challenge now is to hear that message and to turn our very best efforts to rebuilding and renewing our cause and our sense of purpose. Tonight, as I finish my remarks, my greatest thanks goes to my family, to my husband Greg, to our boys, Joe, who worked so hard out there on polling booths today, and to Oliver, to my mother, who's been such a source of inspiration to me, and to my extended family. Our love and support and devotion to each other has been an absolute rock to me and to all of us through our ups and downs in life. And I thank each and every one of them for being that rock and for giving me the chance to live my dream. Special thanks to Oliver today for voting for me on his birthday. At this time, 19 years ago, I was in Labor, and this campaign's been a bit like that, but it's been 5 weeks longer. Queenslanders, it has been my privilege to serve as your 23rd Premier and Australia's first elected woman Premier. My fellow Queenslanders, I hope that you feel that I never faltered when you needed me to be strong, that I never shied away from the big policy issues and the tough decisions, and that I always held your interest in my heart as I governed Queensland. So Queenslanders, thank you. It's been an honour.
Anna Bligh conceding defeat earlier. And that's where we leave our viewers in Queensland for continued coverage of the election on ABC One. Police expect to charge the skipper of a boat which ran aground spilling diesel into Victoria's Port Phillip Bay. The 42-year-old and his 5 crew were rescued from the stricken boat, which is now partially submerged and leaking fuel.
It's called the Rip and lived up to its name. The Lady Cheryl got into trouble in the notorious waters where Port Phillip Bay meets Bass Strait. Hours after the mishap, the 27-metre fishing trawler was partially underwater and drifting. On board, 30,000 litres of diesel. A long slick followed the tide, first out of the bay and then, as it turned, back toward Portsea.
I just love watching boats come through, so I thought I'd come down and have a look.
Probably more concerned about what's on board, the fact it's going to, or may, spill. I don't think it is.
The drama had unfolded in terrible conditions at just after 1 a.m.
The swell at the time was about 4.5 metres.
But the boat first came into trouble when it started taking on water after running aground. So it would not appear that the conditions were the sole factor in the vessel sinking.
A launch crew from Melbourne's Port Pilots, whose job it is to help guide massive ships through the kilometre-wide channel, was already at sea when the fishermen called for help. They pulled alongside the sinking boat and within 10 minutes had 6 men on board. No one was injured.
They coped with it extremely well and displayed exceptional seamanship qualities.
The fishermen were taken to nearby Queenscliff, where police say the skipper returned a positive breath test.
The driver of the vessel has returned an alcohol reading over the prescribed limit.
Port authorities say shipping in and out of Australia's busiest port was not affected. And they say the choppy conditions are helping break up the diesel spill, which hasn't yet made land.